So here we have Kauai, and if we look at Cook's voyage, let's just try to sort of envision um, his perspective and the Hawaiians' perspective um, in what he did. So imagine him coming in here, right? Imagine just for perspective's sake, okay, coming in. There's Waimea, okay. So we have Kauai over here, and if you look around, there's Kauai, right? Hanapepe, Koloa, and Waimea, Kekaha, right? And off to the left, the island of Niihau. So here he comes, and he lands in Waimea Bay. So check that out. Okay, so imagine sort of you coming in as the explorer and seeing these islands for the first time. And you probably have to think, wow, these islands are pretty magnificent. Look at the mountain ranges, look at Waimea Valley, look at all of the vegetation and the high islands, right? Mount Waialeale to the top there and coming around. And he must have been fairly impressed. In fact, was very impressed at what he saw here. So then we know that Cook leaves. Okay, so he leaves and heads up north, right? So he provisions on Kauai for a time and a season, and then moves on. So he heads out into the open north, and he goes. He goes and goes and goes, okay? But what we want to do is let's look at what happened after that, okay? After Cook returns to Hawaii, okay? And when he returns to Hawaii, okay, he doesn't come back to Kauai. In fact, what he does is he returns and finds different islands, okay? So here we have Oahu coming up, right? This is the mighty Kauai channel here. But what Cook does, he comes back, trying to make his way back to the Hawaiian Islands, but instead finds Maui. Okay, so the interesting part is what happens to Cook here. Okay, so we're coming in, and maybe we can sort of zoom out to move along faster here. Okay, there's Molokai, and in the distance we see Maui. Okay, so imagine Cook making all this voyage here. So what he's going to do is actually come in to Maui, okay? And he's going to be sailing, sailing, sailing like we are here, okay? And he's going to find his way, and he's first sighted on his second return, okay? Let's just kind of move in closer here. On the northern tip, right here, of Maui, okay? Right along this side, okay? In these valleys along here. When Cook comes back, this is where he's sighted. Okay, and this is where people see his ship returning again. Okay, so by this time, remember that the news has already traveled. It's traveled from one tip of the islands to the other. Okay, it was the big news of the day, basically, right? If it was on the Channel 6 news or the 6 o'clock news, let's just say it, everybody knew about it, okay, because this was huge. And so he was sighted on this tip as the map shows us, and then he continues on, okay? He continues on around the north of Maui, okay? Of course, we know, if anybody has done any sailing around the islands, you know that, this is probably the roughest part to sail. If you want to sail, you sail on the southern side of the islands. Okay, so here we come across Maui, and here we, okay, coming in here, and Hana's off in the distance here. But what happens is, okay, Cook lands again on this part of the island, okay, and he comes in and he lands, okay, and now this is neat because what happens when Cook comes back for the second time, okay, is that he gets embroiled in all of the politics that happens in terms of our Hawaiian Ali'i and the wars that were going on, okay? Because when Cook comes back, okay, the Hawaiians look at him, okay, and they've sort of deciphered at this point, or in the middle of deciphering, at least the people of Kauai had already deciphered who Cook was. Who was he? And they were saying, well, he's not an Akua, he's a man. Okay, and the people of Maui, the chiefs of Maui and the chiefs of Hawaii Island were definitely to the point of figuring that out. Okay, and that's kind of the neat part and the question we have to ask ourselves here. Okay, so you see Hawaii Island in the background, And at the time that Cook comes back, okay, our beloved chief, our ali'i Kalaniʻopuʻu, Kamehameha's uncle, was on Maui at that time, and so was Kamehameha. Okay, and what they were doing was fighting. Okay, they were waging war to see who was going to have control of the islands. Okay, so our two genealogies and ali'is were at war with each other, and so when they saw Cook, basically they saw and debated. Well, this guy has something we don't, and from a military point, from a strategy point, they said, hey, let's try and make use of this. Okay, and either way, it'll benefit us because, and they reasoned logically, right? It was, if he is an Akua, then he can definitely help us win a war. If he's not an Akua, well, he still has all these guns and weapons that we don't have, and maybe we can make use of that to our advantage. Okay. So it wasn't this sort of fairy tale about, oh, they just fell down and worshiped Cook and thought, oh, look, a white man, or whatever the case was. It was really the case that they were into their war and they were fighting, and whatever advantage they could take to win that was what they wanted to do. So the neat part about this mo'olelo here is that on Maui, okay, Cook lands and decides to take on a passenger, because Cook needed a translator and he was trying to figure out where the hell he was, right? He didn't know where he was. He came back to the islands and he probably couldn't tell one island from another island. So, one of our key actors in our story and in Hawaiian studies is Kamehameha. And he, in fact, gets on board Cook's ship, and him and Captain Cook are sort of trying to steer the vessel in a very classic story. In any case, in any context, militarily, right? You have two generals and two leaders sort of having at it with each other. And if you read Fornander's collections and you read Samuel Kamakawa's account, it's neat because you have at the helm Captain Cook and Kamehameha, two iconic figures. So they're sailing on, right? And Captain Cook, as they're sailing around the coast of Hana here, and Kamehameha are having a conversation. Okay, so you got to picture this, and you got to remember that Kamehameha and Kalaniʻopuʻu, right, were of the Hawaii Island genealogy, and that's where their home base was. There's Hana Airport. So in fact, the strategy was for Kamehameha to coax Captain Cook into returning with him over there to Hawaii Island, right? Because he wanted to bring all of that technology back to his people, right? So he could control Captain Cook, so he could have all of his weapons and all of that sort of stuff. So as we kind of zoom out here, let's just sort of picture this, right? They're in the channel, right? They're in the channel over here, and as we see, off to the left is Hawaii Island, right? And off to the right is Maui. Okay, so Captain Cook wanted to continue around over here. You see Maui off to the right, and Captain Cook wanted to continue around Maui and land in Maui, investigate, see what's going on in Maui. Okay. However, Captain Cook was saying, no, let's go left. Let's go and look at that island over there. That island, Hawaii Island. Hawaii Island is way better. Let's go over there. So they went back and forth as the story goes. So Cook wanted to go right. Kamehameha wanted to go left. And so they kept going back and forth. And because they didn't speak the same language, there was a lot of gesturing and staring and that sort of stuff, intimidation maybe. And Cook, looked at his ship and then pointed this way. And then Kamehameha stamped his foot and pointed this way and said, go that way, go that way. And they went back and forth and back and forth. But as the story happens, Kamehameha gets his way. And so Cook continues on. And they end up actually along the east coast, all the way down here of Hawaii Island. Okay. But what they do is they go all the way around. Okay. So they go all the way around the islands. And they end up all the way on the other side of the island. And Captain Cook makes his fateful landing in Kealakekua Bay in that way. So they pass in Hilo. Oh, there's South Point over there, right? Let's check out South Point, right? And they come around South Point, right? And then they end up where they end up in Sorry, that's kind of bumpy there, but right. So they end up in Kealakekua Bay, which is again to be the final resting place of Captain Cook himself.